Hey, everybody, welcome back to Miles and Mentors. If you're getting into the logistics industry, fraud is something you're going to have to watch out for. And we have an excellent guest on the show today, John Cantera, who's going to walk us through his time getting into the industry, what he's lived and learned along the way, but he's going to touch in on that sensitive topic of fraud in the industry. So stick with us. We have an amazing episode lined up right for you after this on Miles and Mentors.
Welcome to Miles and Mentors, the podcast that humanizes trucking, getting real-life advice and insights from logistics professionals from all over the industry. We sit down with those seasoned mentors who have put in the miles with a mission to pass on the knowledge gained from years in the industry to you. Now buckle up and enjoy the show.
Hey, John, what's going on, man?
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked to get in, learn a little bit more about you and what you do in the industry. If you don't mind, for those that may not know who you are, could you give us a little bit of a high level of just who you are and your role in the industry today?
Sure. I'm John Cantera. Frankly, my big job right now is I'm a contract dispatcher. I know that's kind of an ugly name in this industry, but when you're at least American and you understand the industry, then you can be of good service to especially your small carriers that are out there. But my passion is also as the double broker bounty hunter, where I've been fighting fraud in this industry for over the last 3 years, trying to keep carriers out of trouble, keep brokers out of trouble. And when a carrier does wind up unfortunate enough to fall for one of these scams and not get paid, I also help them get paid. I have a commercial collections license. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, man, if we take it all the way back, what is it that brought you to this industry in the very first place?
I've been in logistics and supply chain since, 98. So over 25 years. I was a logistics officer in the Air Force, did 10 years active duty. Mostly I was in deployment operations, things like that. I dealt with the motor pool guys quite a bit, but more like giving them their tasks instead of running the pool itself. But from there, when I got out, I got into distribution, retail distribution. I was in charge of shipping for Pier 1 on the East Coast.
Okay.
I did a lot with managing the dedicated fleet that we had going out to, I think we serviced 180 stores. So I did the routing for them and all that stuff. So that really got my feet wet in planning on the civilian side. From there, I got into the maritime industry, where I was a stevedore. I got hired on as the general manager of a private port facility. Now, I never had maritime experience before. So how I became the general manager of a port, I don't know. I must have done something right, because I took a failing facility and made it profitable.
Nice.
And so that I did something right. But when the CEO of the company left, I was considered one of his guys. So guess who got squeezed? And it happened to me more times than I can count. I was in Savannah, Georgia, when I got out of the military, and I think I got what I call pump and dumped probably about 6 times. And that's, you get hired by somebody, a national company who's just moving into the area.
Right.
Most cases it was warehousing or something along those lines. And because I knew all my stuff, they hired me at top dollar to set it up for them, get everything up and running. And then after about a year and a half, they lay me off and hire somebody else to come in at half the price to maintain it.
Yeah.
We called it the pump and dump. I got really tired of that. I guess it was 2017. I went and started my own trucking company, Final Mile Residential Delivery. I had a fleet of 5 box trucks starting off, operating in Savannah, Georgia, and Pensacola, Florida. And then I started going over the road a little before COVID. At the end, COVID killed me. COVID killed me before all the big incentives and PPP came out and all that. So I wound up going under early in COVID. I've been sued into oblivion. Still paying settlements. Like some good $4,000 a month. I'm still paying out in settlements right now.
Wow.
I at the time I had 10 trucks, but I had almost $250,000. No, I had more than that. I had almost $500,000 in debt between maintenance, leases, financing, and fuel and stuff like that. I mean, my weekly fuel bill was upwards of 10 grand. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah, I ended up owing my fuel company 30 grand by the time it was over.
Good Lord.
But, I've made a lot of mistakes. So for new guys who are out and up and coming, two things that I'll tell you not to do. Number one, don't rent. Whatever you do, I don't care if renting is part of your lease agreement. Never freaking rent. Just don't. Number two, do not count on merchant cash advances, MCAs, for financing. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Save yourself the headache. I've gone through years of hell over it, and I'm still going through it. So I've been dispatching ever since. It was a quick way for me to transition to where I was able to sit there and generate an income. Unfortunately, it's a variable income, so I'm constantly trying to find new hustles here and there to figure out what I can do to help make ends meet. About 3 years ago, and this is how I became the double broker bounty hunter. About 3 years ago, when double brokering really started getting going, like late 2021, we started seeing patterns between my carriers and I of these BOLs that just didn't relate to the brokers we were using. We were like, what the hell's going on here? We were working with brokers like AGD Logistics and Jacksonville Freight Solutions. So those are two very big known double brokers. Well, they're known now. They weren't known back then. So once we realized what these guys were doing, we reverse engineered the scam, and we figured, okay, if we book loads with these guys every time, we bust them with the cargo still in the truck, then we can go to the real broker and we're going to make an extra $500-600 a load from the real broker, because back then they were just skimming off the top. So we made in 2022 an additional $96,000 among 5 trucks.
Wow.
In extra money by going after these guys. And the way we justified it was that we were preventing these scammers from generating a revenue stream. We were stopping their revenue stream. And it worked so well, I was getting death threats on a regular basis. I mean, you're doing something right when you're fighting fraud, when you're getting death threats. I'd love to see these guys actually try to carry it out. I'm a veteran. Pull up in my driveway trying to do something to me, you're going to have 2 to the chest and 1 to the head before you get out of your car, okay? I live in Florida, folks. Self-defense is right on, okay? But it was my drivers who called me the double broker bounty hunter, and it kind of stuck. So since then, fraud, as everyone knows, has continued to evolve. And the flavor of the month now is you have all these guys out there who are impersonating carriers and impersonating brokers to try to sucker carriers in to hauling these loads, and then not paying them at all. So once all that really started developing, what we would do is we would identify the scam, flesh it out, reverse engineer it, and then get alerts out through our network as to what's going on. Unfortunately, with a good 700 or 1,000 new carriers every week coming into the system, there's a ready pool of suckers every day. Sorry, new guys, I'm not trying to call you suckers, but you don't know until you've experienced it, and until you get to that point, it's a very expensive lesson to learn. And the bottom line is, if it doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, doesn't taste right, something seems off, there's a problem, and you need to stop and figure that out, what that problem is, right away. Because if you deliver, you may not get paid, and that's a situation no one wants.
100%. So you kind of looking at this, we're talking about new guys coming in, potential suckers. I mean, it is what it is. When you don't know the ins and outs of that, it's easy to fall for a trap that someone seasoned like yourself can be like, oh, there's telltale signs there. Hindsight's 2020 on that stuff. How important do you think it is, with that in mind and so much more in today's industry, somebody coming in to have a strong mentor to really, help them build that foundation?
Critical, absolutely critical. In fact, I see that as one of my jobs as a dispatcher.
Yeah, love that.
I do my best not to take on clients that are less than 6 months old as a dispatcher. And anyone who comes to me less than that, I say, look, lease on with an experienced carrier and let your authority mature first.
Yeah.
Just because it's so hard as a new carrier to be able to book anything. But in that time frame, in those early days, you need to really start paying attention to what you're seeing on the boards. The load boards themselves are actually very good. They're very functional, and they have great information out there. Okay. I know there are a lot of people who sit there and say that the rate information is manipulated and all that. Don't get caught up in that BS, because that's all it is BS.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what the market rate is and pay attention to what's being advertised. The most common thing I see these days that these new carriers are falling for is you get a load going from Atlanta to Chicago, and the going rate for something like that is about $2 a mile, okay, for a dry van. And if they're offering $4 a mile, don't just walk away, run away. It is a guaranteed scam. No one's paying that. Okay, be realistic, especially when in the comments you see a Gmail email address. I mean, dead freaking giveaway. Most brokers do not run off of Gmail. Now, granted, I know of 2 who do use Gmail, and they've been using Gmail for 20 years, and they refuse to change. Okay, cool. I'll work with them every day. But most of the time, when you see a Gmail email address in the comment section, it is a scam. Watch for it. The signs are there. Don't just think, oh man, I'm going to make a fuck ton of money. Wrong. Sorry, it ain't gonna work. There's no one paying that kind of money in this market. Not right now. It ain't happening. It's not COVID.
Well, so with that, I know over the last several years, I mean, fraud has been the topic, right? And it's insane to see the level that it's gotten to today. You've been in the industry a while. You said 25 years. Now, before this kind of current boom, was there fraud in the industry? And if there was, what did that look like?
In the trucking industry, there was some, but nowhere near to that extent. You think of cargo theft, as a form of fraud. Cargo theft 20 years ago was what you would see on, say, if you were watching Goodfellas, somebody walking up and stealing a truck, for the mob. It's not like that these days. It's gotten far more sophisticated. The internet has made it so sophisticated, and then you're not just dealing with local gangbangers trying to make a buck. Are there situations where guys' trucks are getting stolen? Yes. Especially if they know there are TVs in the back or something like that. And we all watched that video of the container on a rail car in Chicago, where they were just sitting there stripping TVs out of it back in December. Does that stuff happen? Yes, but that's not the big focus of fraud in today's industry. You did not see the level of fraud that you're seeing now. Today, you have involvement of international entities. A lot of them are foreign syndicates and crime families that are using all different kinds of tactics to attack all different kinds of industries. But transportation happens to be exceptionally vulnerable because of lack of attention by the Fed in trying to protect the industry. FMCSA is doing absolutely nothing right now to make things better. There are a couple programs that they started, but they've been put on hold thanks to a lot of the different things that are going on with the new administration. So nothing is happening. I think the picture has changed a lot, but is the old school stuff still happening? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just nowhere near as pronounced as it used to be. You're not looking at the Lufthansa heist of New York in the 70s. You're not looking at stuff like that anymore. Can it happen? Sure, but
Yeah. But that's just
not what
not
everyone's afraid of.
that today. And that's crazy. You kind of nailed exactly what I was going to ask next about, because the logistics industry is so vital, so important, but also from what we know in a big picture, so regulated that it's amazing to hear that they're really not tackling this, at least yet. Do you think they will?
There are several programs in place at FMCSA to start doing that. Now,
Okay.
I know this because I actually applied for one of the jobs. FMCSA just stood up a registration fraud team. It's under Ken Riddle's team at FMCSA. Their sole job is to shore up the front gates on the registration process. The big problem we had in the industry 3 years ago were that these scammers were easily able to get authorities. Okay. Now, in most cases, the scammers have abandoned trying to get their own authorities and are now impersonating. But in order to prevent them from going back to that tactic, FMCSA is trying to shore up the front gates. What they're doing is they're employing things like facial recognition. There's talk about implementing the TWIC card. For anyone who is registering for an authority, they need to have a TWIC card. There's talk of, what's the other thing? Background checks, having to do a competency test before ever getting an authority, having to do a safety audit before you ever get your authority. All these different things in order to, one, ensure that there's a physical person there applying for the authority and not just a scammer or a computer trying to just generate MC numbers. They want to shore up the front gates, and that's the first step. And once that team does that, then that team's going to transition and look back at the active authorities that exist. And there are some 360,000 active authorities, broker and carrier, that currently exist. But many of them, as many as 25% of them, are not operating legally. And what I mean by that is that they do not meet the current requirements for maintaining an authority. They're using a fake address or a PO box or something along those lines, a virtual address.
Yeah.
Virtual addresses are not authorized under FMCSA. Do you still have your authority? Yes. But at some point in the near future, those authorities are going to be reviewed and those authorities will be revoked. So that's coming.
Now, obviously, with everything, there's, a bit of a double-edged sword factor in the industry as we're, dealing with driver shortages and everything. With that being implemented, do you see that impacting the industry in a negative manner? I mean, obviously, we got to tackle the fraud, but do you see any other realms where, that may bottleneck or anything?
Not really, not yet. We have, and the reason why I say that is because of the rates. The rates have not changed in the last few years, okay? And if it has, it's been very minuscule, maybe a flux of 5%. It's not significant. We have seen a massive number of authorities disappear over the last 3 years alone. We've gone from 700,000 to almost half at this point. And has there been a change in rates? No. So what that tells us is either those were all bad registrations and scammers who are finally being weeded out of the system, or there's other forces at play suppressing rates until natural supply and demand catch up and the contraction of the industry, the reduction in the number of authorities that exist, finally indicate a reduced capacity. Rates will then finally start going up. Once we see that point, once we see that transition, now you're looking at those forces having an adverse reaction and creating bottlenecks. Then we'll start going into, driver shortages and whatnot. I do not believe there's a driver shortage. I hear what everyone's saying. I know the new administration is trying to put forward some kind of a program to deal with it. I can't see that. I can't see that because the rates don't indicate that. Okay. The rates indicate there's an excess of capacity. Not not a reduction. So I'm not certain there actually is a shortage. I think people are looking at the wrong things. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I've got an economics degree. I like to think I look at everything from both sides. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm missing here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially from that perspective and having the time that you do within the industry. I mean, you've been around to see it fluctuate and kind of be able to tell those trends, right? You have that inside knowledge that so many today, really depend on.
Mm-hmm.
For guys branching out, going from maybe being a company driver into an owner operator, et cetera, looking at all this fraud. I mean, trucking, we've said it 100 times before, but trucking at that level is an interesting business, right? Because all these other businesses, you've got an office, you've got staff, everything. With trucking, so much falls on that owner operator. I mean, he's trying to run a business while also driving a truck, and that's just, unreal to keep up with. So a lot of these guys depend on dispatching. Now, when looking at dispatching, and obviously that's where you run into a lot of fraud when you're booking these loads. What is important, for a driver to connect with a dispatcher and have that, sense of safety that they know what they're looking for to try to avoid as much fraud as possible?
Vet them, vet them, vet them, vet them, vet them. How do I put this? My co-host on my show, Kate Price, she was the head of dispatching for NOAA at one point. Now, she and I, we don't like to talk about NOAA. We don't like NOAA. We drank from the Kool-Aid when they first started. We've opened our eyes since, and we have distanced ourselves from that organization. But when she was there, she created a code of ethics for dispatchers, and that code of ethics would help a new owner operator to help guide them to see whether or not they're actually getting home somebody who understands the business. There are a few things that I would recommend to an owner operator when they're trying to select a dispatcher. Number one, and I hate saying this, and I'm not anti-immigration or anything like that, make sure they speak English. I mean, I'm sorry. I've met a lot of good foreign dispatchers, and some of them are very, very good. But they need to have been here. They need to have been in this country. They need to understand our geography. They need to understand which way is up. I mean, hell, I once booked a load with a scammer that we knew back in my hunting days. I booked a load from Boston to Chicago, and it was 2 tiny crates, and I knew I was getting paid a little for it, but I also knew it was double brokerage, so I knew I was going to get paid more. I was looking forward to it. The guy I picked it up at noon. He expected me to be in Chicago by 7 p.m. And I'm like, huh? I mean, like, the distance between Boston and Chicago.
Yeah.
If I had a Formula One racer, I couldn't do it, let alone a freaking box truck. So, I mean, we knew we had this guy dead to rights, but I mean, know the freaking geography, know where you can go, know how far you can get. If you've got a dispatcher who's sitting there trying to make you do 800 miles in, 13 hours, it's impossible. Understand your hours of service. Your dispatcher needs to understand hours of service.
Yeah.
I also question a dispatcher who has their own authority. A dispatcher that has a carrier authority or a dispatcher that has a broker authority, either one is susceptible for even inadvertently committing fraud. Because, that you get a carrier, let's say a new carrier under 6 months of authority, and the dispatcher has their own authority. Their authority is like 2 years old and all that good stuff. Well, the dispatcher may sit there and say, you know what, I'm having a hard time booking for this guy. So look, dude, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to book it under my authority, and I'll give you the load. And then when I factor it, I'll just go ahead and pay it.
Yeah.
If anyone has stopped to read the FMCSA's rules and regulations regarding dispatch services, you would know right then and there that at least 2 violations are taking place in that. Okay. Dispatcher never handles the money. It always belongs to the carrier. And number 2, man, double brokered. It is double brokering. It is illegal brokerage. You cannot as a dispatcher, use one authority to book a load and then hand it to another authority. You can't even do that if the truck breaks down. You know, at least a couple times a year, I've got a carrier who breaks down, and I've got another carrier who happens to be within 100 miles, who could take up the load. Well, can that other carrier pull the load? Yes. But you have to coordinate that with the broker, and the broker must issue a new rate confirmation to the other carrier. And then you can go ahead and monitor the transfer, and all's good. But if I just did it just to do it and not told the broker anything, or man, if that truck got into an accident, the cargo wouldn't be covered.
Yeah.
No one would cover it. It's a liability issue. Double brokering is not the big deal it is because, oh, somebody's giving a load to somebody when they shouldn't do it. It's about the insurance. It's the liability. It's the money involved, because you're talking about $100,000 worth of freight or more. And if there's an accident, it's not covered. Who's going to pay that bill?
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, there's a lot more to it than just, you know, some guy sitting in a basement thinking he's making $400 double brokering a load to somebody and skimming some off the top. There's a hell of a lot more to it.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of, especially the new guys, they're not going to understand. They're not going to understand the nuance that involves the insurance. They're not going to understand the nuance that involves different kinds of liability. But boy, let me tell you something. The older brokers and the older carriers, we sure as shit get it. And brokers are not immune to this either. You know, new brokers fall for these scams too.
Yeah.
New brokers have to pay as much attention as new carriers do, because they just don't know. And until they've been there, until they've done it, until they got that T-shirt, you're just a huge walking billboard that says sucker.
Yeah.
You know, and they're coming for you. They're watching for you. They will come for you. And if you think that you're immune because, oh, well, I've got highway, oh, I've got RMIS, oh, I got carrier 411, wrong. No, I've never seen a system out there that can't be beat.
Wow.
Never.
So for the guys watching this, getting a little bit of information overload, because I mean, there's so much that goes into fraud today. No, this is great, but I'm just thinking for that new guy that's like, wait, what is going on here? What is, I mean, so there's obviously different types of fraud hitting the industry, but what's the most common? And can you break down like what does this actually look like in the process of fraud? You know, is this from the shipper putting it out to when the carrier gets it? Like what does this look like in the most common circumstances?
Okay. Double brokering, as everyone understands the basic definition, it's when you have a freight broker who tenders a load to what he thinks is the carrier. That quote unquote carrier then takes the load and then rebrokers it to a different carrier, usually with the intent of stealing some or all of the freight bill along the way. All forms of fraud start with double brokering. Okay. Cargo theft, holding cargo ransom, all those things start with double brokering, because, you know, they want to make sure they can book the load and get their hands on the cargo before anyone realizes something's wrong. Okay. So everything starts at double brokering. Trying to fight double brokering, trying to recognize it and understand what's going on behind it, you have to protect yourself first and foremost. And I don't care how many systems there are out there for both brokers and carriers and trying to defend themselves. The very first thing I would do as a new carrier today, looking back into my crystal ball, ditch your Gmail. Spend the $20 a year, get yourself a proper domain that matches your company name, and use your email off of that. That's first and foremost, because it's very, very difficult for a scammer to try to utilize your domain and create a new email under your domain to impersonate you to a broker. Whereas if you're in Gmail, say you're carrier XYZ. Well, a scammer will create a new email address that says dispatch XYZ at Gmail.
Yeah.
Okay. And a broker is not usually going to recognize or question the difference. So very first thing, get your own email domain. The second thing I would do is make sure you have a competent and experienced dispatcher if you're going to use the dispatch service. And I do recommend early on using a dispatch service. If nothing else, you can learn from them. A dispatch service is going to keep you from taking those loads on the load board that are too good to be true, because they're guaranteed scams. That most of us dispatchers know what we're looking for. We can recognize it in a heartbeat. Jesus Christ, what, just yesterday, Global Trans had some load going 500 miles paying $4,000 for a box truck. I mean, come on. But I guarantee somebody booked that load. I guarantee somebody booked that load. And in a couple of days from now, Global Trans is going to get a very angry driver calling them saying, hey, I booked this load with you and you're not paying for it. Well, it's because it's not our load. What do you mean? You better freaking pay me. No, it's not our load. You need to know how to go after some of these guys, especially if you become a victim. Yeah. I need to backtrack a second.
No, that's great.
If you're a victim, because you're probably going to wind up a victim before you identify these issues along the way, unless you watch my regular series on my YouTube channel, but that's another story. If you become a victim, the first thing you need to do is not just rip the head off of who you thought the broker was. You need to figure out who the real broker is.
Yeah.
Okay. And that can be a challenge. You, believe it or not, you probably have the information you need to figure it out. If you can't, you could always reach out to somebody like me and I can help sort it out and figure out who the real broker is. And then we can go to the real broker and say, hey, you actually owe this guy. You paid the wrong person. Because let's face it, you know, a lot of these brokers, they'll say, well, I already paid somebody for this. I'm not paying twice.
Yeah.
That doesn't fly. Okay. The real final mile carrier must be paid. That's by federal law. That's 49 CFR 377. Okay. So what you would need to do, you need to approach the real broker, say, not only did I haul the load, I actually have the physical BOL, the actual pen and ink document that you could compare to a scan and say, this is actually ink. Hey, see, there's even a coffee stain right here in the front corner for my coffee when I was driving that truck. Okay. That one piece of paper is the only piece of paper in a court of law that identifies that person as the actual carrier. And then you are entitled to be paid. Now, what I will say is, just because you were offered $1 million to haul that one pallet 1 mile, don't expect that broker to pay you the $1 million. It's not going to happen. Okay. If you wind up in this type of situation where you were offered more money by the scammer than the load really paid, you are only entitled to the amount that the real broker originally promised. Even if it's $1 a mile, that's all you're entitled to. And I can tell you right now, carriers, be glad you can get your hands on it, because at least it'll help offset some of your costs and you will have learned a very valuable lesson about the loads that you select.
Yeah. That's great stuff. I think your next step here is to do like the freight fraud masterclass, my friend.
It's coming. I've got actually a series that I'm running right now on my YouTube channel, separate from my weekly live show that I do. That is all about everything we've learned about fraud in the last 3 years.
That's awesome.
And I every week, every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Central, I release the next part. Part 9 releases tomorrow. And there'll probably be about 15, 16 parts by the time it's done. But when I do finish it, I've got to start it back over again, because fraud is constantly evolving. I mean, there are things from 2 weeks ago that I need to change. So as I'm going to go through it, I'm going to recycle all this stuff and keep it current. So I mean, it will be out there. I mean, hell, even right now, I'm writing an opinion for an attorney. I'm sitting as a subject matter expert for an attorney in a fraud case. So I'm in the middle of writing an opinion right now about a double broker situation. So a lot of the material that I'm using in that podcast series is going to be on that opinion that I'm writing. So there's it comes around.
Well, I mean, to your point though about how it's evolving, I think is really, really important to keep front of mind though. And it's amazing, as much effort as these guys put into this fraud, like they could probably be some really savvy business people if they wanted to. But as much as
Say that all the time.
we're going after this fraud and we're trying to learn it and we're trying to understand and be able to spot it, these guys are also on their side trying to learn, how can we do fraud better? Like, how can we evolve this? How can we keep going? Here's the next scam.
They've gotten really good about it. And then let me tell you a little something about how things are done with Amazon. Amazon is a flavor of the month type of scam that's going on right now. And what we're typically seeing with Amazon is you have people who have Amazon accounts booking banks of loads. And we're talking about huge numbers, 300, 400 loads at a time.
Wow.
A one truck carrier booking 400 loads at a time through Amazon app. Yes, they can do that. And then what they do is they turn around and they go after a broker, usually through a phishing scheme. Those who are here who have been hearing some of the new brokers complaining about all the emails they get from DAT, hey, update your credentials or verify your credentials. You click on that email, boom, you just gave away your DAT credentials to a scammer. Wow. Once they get your DAT credentials, then they take those 300 loads and they throw them up on DAT in the matter of seconds. I mean, they can have it up in a couple of minutes. And then somebody's going to book all those loads, and they're all a bunch of trailer moves. And then somebody's going to move all those trailers, usually in the next couple of days. And it's all going to pay out to that one Amazon account. So that scammer that's sitting on that Amazon account just sat there and made, I shit you not, $500,000 plus.
Wow.
For that work. Okay. Yeah. All they had to do was coordinate the 300 some drivers who just went and ran all that stuff. So there's usually a team involved. Like I said, a lot of these are done by syndicates. Okay. But there is so much money that these scammers are making doing this stuff that they're almost nothing can stop them. I mean, you get guys out there who are trying to sell their authorities out there. I see it all the time on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm getting out of the business. I want to sell my authority. You are the target of these scammers. And frankly, guys, you're part of the problem. Okay. Selling your authority, I don't believe should be legal. I think FMCSA should stop that crap, but it can be done. You can transfer authority still. But when you sell your authority, they want you to give them all your Amazon credentials, your email credentials, everything. And once you hand everything over, they're willing to pay top dollar. Your average authority, if you just sell an authority just to sell it to get out of the business, you might make a couple grand, $3,000 off of it. These guys are willing to pay 30, 40, 50,000.
Wow.
To do this. But that's because they're making $1 million off of it.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is all fraud. Every last bit of it is fraud. And most of it is being done by these international actors. If we can get guys to stop selling their authorities, if we can get people to pay attention to what they're booking on the load boards, then we can stop a lot of this fraud that's going on.
That's a great point about selling the authorities. I hadn't really thought through it at that point. Technology today is growing at an amazing rate, and we have some great stuff out there. But looking at it from this perspective, the technology in the logistics industry around fraud, do you feel like it's working for us or potentially against us at this point in time?
I think it's in its infancy. I think the potential is there to do it right. I think Highway and My Carrier Portal and RMIS, they're all on the right path, but it's not perfect. A lot of them use predictive analytics. What they try to do is they try to determine whether or not a carrier is going to be successful in carrying a load, and they draw from hundreds of different sources, and of course they won't tell you what those sources are to try to predict that stuff. I'm not a big fan of predictive analytics. Predictive analytics doesn't indicate that this guy's going to be a good carrier today when he can turn around tomorrow and be a scammer. Predictive analytics, I think, are trash. And I think the big guys in this industry, the highways and whatnot, are starting to figure that out. What I like are the hard facts. When I'm going and I'm dispatching a carrier, one thing that bothers me the most is if the carrier doesn't have an inspection. I mean, how many carriers are saying, oh, I'm sorry, we won't work with you because you need an inspection? I think it's the biggest BS that you can imagine, because until July of last year, you could stop at the scale house along the interstate and you could ask for an inspection. They may not give you one, but you could at least ask. You can't even ask anymore. Okay. And that directive went out back in July. So in about 6 months from now, as people who have inspections, those inspections start falling off of their record, because it only stays on there for 2 years. In about 6 months from now, more than half of the people who have inspections are people who have been observed operating unsafely. They got pulled over for being unsafe. They were pulled into the scale house because the camera saw them doing something wrong. So these brokers that are requiring carriers to have an inspection, they're only going to have potentially bad carriers to work with. So something's got to change. All of this stuff, all the fraud fighting tools that are out there, again, they're in their infancy, and we're just reacting at this point. It was kind of like during COVID. Fauci and his team would come up with recommendations on how to do things. A week later, they learned something new about the disease where their previous recommendations weren't good anymore, and they had to change their recommendations. We're learning as we go. But as we said before, the scammers are learning too, and they're learning faster than we are. So they're always ahead of us. We're always stuck in the back trying to re-engineer what the heck they did so we can try not to fall for it again. And that's really where I come in. That's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
That's amazing. Man, I'm going to get to some shameless plugs for you, but we've covered a ton here today. Anything you think we've missed that is worthy of throwing in?
Look, we just scratched the surface. If you understand double brokering and you can recognize it on the boards and keep yourself from booking those scam loads, you're already way ahead of the game. Are there more sophisticated ways to steal freight out there that a driver just is not going to be aware of? Absolutely. Stay tuned to my show and you can pick some of these up. But there's a lot of stuff out there. If it doesn't look right, smell right, taste right, it's probably not. Trust your instincts. And if you don't know what to do about it, get help. Because there are people out there who do help, like me. And I don't always charge.
Well, like we've talked about a bunch in this episode today, fraud is everywhere and it's growing, and it's something that you cannot afford to not pay attention to. And I'm thankful that there's guys like you that are taking this so seriously and fighting back in the industry, because without guys like you, I think the industry would just get clean toppled over, and who knows what that'd mean for our nation as a whole. Like, we depend on this industry so widely.
I can tell you exactly what it would mean. Okay. Let's say, for example, trucks stop running for whatever reason. Could be fraud, could be that truckers get together and go on strike.
Yeah.
Day one, all fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh meat are out of the grocery stores. Day two, all the boxed stuff, all the non-perishables are gone from the grocery stores. Day three, the distribution centers for the grocery stores are 100% empty.
Yeah.
Okay. Day four, hospitals are out of supplies. And basically we have now completely shut down. And it would take, for every day that the transportation industry is down, it'll take at least a month per day to start getting it back up. So that's what we're looking at. This industry is far too critical in terms of not just our own livelihoods, but of national security. So 100%. Somebody needs to pay attention.
100%. Well, man, thank you for everything today. I know there is, like you said, we scratched the tip of the surface here. There's so much more to learn. I know you've got a wealth of knowledge that you put out through your show, your YouTube, your business, everything. How can people find you? How can people find out about your business, watch your show, listen to your podcast? Let us know the links.
Okay, so the shameless plugs here. My show, Stop the Scam, is out there on all of our social media. Best place to catch me is on Facebook or LinkedIn. You could also catch it on my YouTube. There's all streams in all those locations. I also have a weekly show that I put out called it's just a fraud prevention series that is also available on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Double Broker Bounty Hunters. So you can go ahead and check out all my stuff out there. If you ever need to get a hold of me, I'm very easy to get a hold of. My website, vigilanttransport.com, has all my contact information on it. You can also contact me directly through the website. You can email me through the site. There's lots of ways to get a hold of me. But my number one priority is making sure that we take care of these active scams that are going on. So if you have a double brokered load that you're currently under, feel free to reach out to me right away. I'll talk to you anytime, and we can put together a game plan as to how to salvage what's going on so you can at least make some money off of it. You know, I'll be honest, if you think you got something wrong, you've got to speak up right the hell away, because if you wait till after you deliver, the damage is already done. You could have delivered to the wrong place, in which case you're an unwitting participant in cargo theft. You know, what a way to start your career as a trucker. You know, if you know something's funny while the cargo's on your back, you're in the strongest place you can be to try to leverage what's going on. You can become the savior for that customer instead of the bastard carrier that let the cargo get away.
No doubt.
You know, so that's pretty much what I got.
Man, fantastic. This was a great episode. I so much enjoyed sitting down and talking with you, and I hope to have you back on again in the future. We can dig a little bit deeper.
Anytime.
Well, fantastic. We will get those links in the show notes below as well. I encourage you guys, check out his content. We need guys like this in the industry to keep fighting that good fight. So thank you seriously for everything you do, and I hope you keep it up, man.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
For everyone out there watching, thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe out there. Have a great day.